My name is Mark Miner. I am an investigative writer and author. In my travels, I've investigated many people and places. Watch as I seek out stories that are typically outside of the box of normal. I am the Seeker.
Hello everybody. So I wanted to start this topic on consensual cannibalism. How this topic came to me was surprisingly on TikTok. I like everybody, or should say the majority of people, do go on TikTok, and I find it entertaining on certain things. But I saw this topic about consensual cannibalism, and it intrigued me. And you're probably asking me, what is consensual cannibalism? Consensual cannibalism is the act of permission by the deceased to have others consume or eat the remains after death. Yeah, pretty gross. So a lot of people find this appalling, that people are actually consuming their dead families or friends or the such, even their children who have passed away, as disgusting. But there are others who find it appropriate. The ones who find it appropriate have defended it by saying that it allows them to keep a part of their loved ones after they've passed on through consuming them. We've seen practices like this thousands of years. Cannibalism has been well documented in much of the world to this day, including Fiji, the Amazon Basin, the Congo, and New Zealand. Also, thousands of years, Neanderthals have also been believed to practice cannibalism, as well as these Neanderthals have been eaten by modern people, which would be us Homo sapiens, back thousands of years. But let's come to something current. Many women who give birth successfully have kept their afterbirth to consume by the family or by themselves. They find this a religious practice. They find this, to be something that is good for them, and because it holds a lot of nutrients and stuff like that. Again, a lot of you probably think that's gross, but to them, it's not. So the reason why I wanted to do this episode, or maybe episodes, who knows, maybe I'll do another one in the future, on consensual cannibalism, is because I want to look at both sides of the argument. I myself personally would never consume human flesh, to my knowledge. And the reason why I say to my knowledge is because, as you'll see in these investigations that I'm doing and research and then bringing to you in these episodes, is we may or may not be consuming human flesh. This may be surprising to you, but I think once you watch these episodes, you're going to be surprised of the possibility that you may be consuming human flesh, even in a small percentage. So I'm going to go through this episode with you and kind of lay out a little bit of what consensual cannibalism is. I'm going to give you some case studies of people who are currently being charged with cannibalism, or who have been charged with cannibalism. One case was this, where a guy put an ad in the paper for someone to volunteer to be consumed after their death, and he has been charged with that, which is very rare, as you'll see in this episode, or very weird, I should say, because in this episode I'll go over the legal implications of that and what laws allow us or not to allow us to consume flesh, human flesh, I should say. So, is it any different than consuming animal flesh? Or is it just, not, very taboo, very disgusting? So, stay with me and we'll walk through this. And if you have any questions whatsoever, I would love your comments. Thanks, guys.
So this is Armin Mavis. I'm probably butchering his last name, excuse the pun. He's a German former computer repair technician who achieved international attention for killing and eating a voluntary victim in 2001. After Armin and the victim jointly attempted to eat the victim's severed penis, Armin killed his victim and proceeded to eat a large amount of the victim's flesh. He was arrested in 2002, and in January of 2004, he was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 8 years and 6 months. Another case is Armie Hammer. So a lot of you know that he's a star from the movie Call Me By Your Name, which is a great movie. Alleged conversations on Instagram with women included talk of rape fantasies, the desire to inflict pain on his partners, and one woman who claimed he was 100% a cannibal, from BDSM to drinking blood, cutting toes, and his alleged cannibalism are all accusations from more than several women. So is it legal for consensual cannibalism? So even if the German court had to struggle with the case of Armin Mavis, as there are no legal restrictions against cannibalism in Germany, furthermore, even in the United States, it does not have any written laws that specifically address cannibalism, except for one state only, Idaho. So, obviously with Armin, it was illegal because he killed his victim. But if they voluntarily give their body, or if a person dies and leaves their body, it's not illegal. So this is a website called BitesLab.com. This is where celebrities can give portions of their, say, cellular or meaty tissue to be replicated and put into sausages, where you can buy and consume of celebrities. Another website you can check out is Clonade. Clonade is an American-based human cloning organization registered as a company in the Bahamas, founded in 1997. It has philosophical ties with the UFO religion Raelism, which sees cloning as a first step in achieving immortality. Once the cloning is complete, and it is alleged that the clone of the person involved will consume the flesh of the original person who was cloned.
Alright, guys, so in conclusion to all this, I know it was a lot of information to take in and it was kind of gross. But I want to read you this article that I found online to kind of give some perspective of the debate going on in society. So it's called Seeing Double, Consensual Cannibalism. So I'm going to be reading this off my screen, so I won't be looking at you directly in the camera. So Seeing Double columnist, Thomas Brody, who is 22, and Cole Graber Mitchell, 22, debate the ethics of consensual cannibalism. So Brody argues that endo-cannibalism especially does not harm and holds significance to many the world over. Graber Mitchell refutes, discussing where society should draw a line. That sounds very... now this is an article put out in 2021, so it's a little bit old, about a year. However, it tells you a little bit about how this topic is arising and how people are now come to terms with this happening. So keep in mind throughout all this that these two men were roommates. Okay, so here's Thomas's take. This is what he writes. It's an experience to which any Amherst student can relate. After a disappointing Val dinner, I don't know what that means, Maria returns to her dorm only to find her roommate Carl asleep.
Through the clarity of her hunger, Maria realizes that she is standing in front of an entire platter of lighter side chicken, only fresher and not so overdone. Instead of ramen, she thinks of raw men. I think that's just a funny take to this article, to kind of lighten it up a little bit. But this is what Thomas writes. I won't deny that I have stood countless hours over the sleeping body of my co-columnist, wondering whether his stringy legs or flabby chest would have the lowest sodium content. Remember, they're roommates. Today, however, I am defending only consensual cannibalism, where a person agrees to let others eat them after he or she dies of natural causes. So, numerous cultures around the world practice cannibalism as a funeral rite. It's called endo-cannibalism. For members of their community, for them, as well as the deceased person being eaten, cannibalism is not a form of harm or mutilation. It is a deeply spiritual and cathartic action in literally making a loved one's body part of your own body. Many people get a valuable sense of closure. Such traditions, excuse me, I have a problem talking today, are not to everyone's taste, of course, which is why we allow people to choose their own forms of burial. The point is not that many people find cannibalism distasteful. It's entirely possible to imagine people in the United States who might want to cut or to eat or be eaten for genuine spiritual or religious reasons. I need to learn a foreign language because obviously I keep trying to slip into it. In order to say that an emotionally important practice like endo-cannibalism is immoral, my co-columnist, who would have to demonstrate that endo-cannibalism does not seriously harm an individual or society at large, neither is true. The body being eaten is already dead, and while others might find cannibalism gross, no one is forcing them to watch or take part. Consensual cannibalism harms no one. Compare that to eating a hamburger, which directly contributes both to the killing of sentient creatures and a larger system of unsustainable meat production. Human flesh might well be a more moral meal than beef. Critics of cannibalism, like my co-columnist, act as though funerary cannibalism is some red line that cannot ever be crossed. Yet in the West today, we already permit all sorts of bizarre or to some disturbing funeral practices. I agree with this. We let people declare their desire to be burned, even though Catholics consider it wrong, used as theater props, or turned into shotgun and ammunition. There's also a case where this woman would sprinkle a little bit of her husband's ashes into her food and eat it. Some people donate their bodies to science, is what he's talking about, to such as in Portland, Oregon, to put on a show of what the human body looks like, or for students in the medical field to practice on. We will allow these practices because of our deep-seated belief that humans have a right to decide what is done with their own body. Funerary cannibalism is no different. What's more, cannibalism was a fixture of American culture more recently than you might expect. As late as the 20th century, Europeans and Americans ate human body parts as medicine. This is true, do your research. If morality is determined by cultural norms, as my co-columnist believes, then our society is cannibalistic to the core. In opposing cannibalism, my co-columnist implicitly uses his misinterpretation of Western culture as an ethical yardstick, to which I say, back off, colonizer. Hate that word. I, for one, will not let this muffin in the shape of a man use his racist, imperialist, Eurocentric, hoaxist, and fascist intuition to dictate which harmless actions are moral and which are immoral. I'm getting these two don't get along. Okay, so yeah, that was pretty harsh. My co-columnist would have you believe that despite causing no harm to anyone, cannibalism is still ethically wrong because, well, contemporary American society says it is. That circular argument is essentially the same dogma used by those who opposed gay marriage or marijuana in the 1980s. That's a stretch. Okay. Smoking marijuana, gay marriage, cannibalism. That's a huge stretch. Okay. My co-columnist seems to believe that we live in some kind of dystopia where the only way behavior can be moral is for it to be practiced by a large group of people. That's not true. Fortunately, that vile and repressive world is only a figment of my co-columnist's imagination. You might find cannibalism distasteful, excuse the pun. That's your decision to make. But people should always think twice before universally condemning harmless actions that they dislike. Plenty of legitimate reasons for cannibalism exist, and people have a right to decide what is done with their body when they die. In short, there is room in the world for both cannibals and non-cannibals. Stop your puritanical social policing. Wow. Mr. Graber Mitchell, you've bitten off more than you can chew. Again, excuse the pun. I get where he's coming from. Everybody has a right to things. One thing he didn't touch on, though, was the psychological implications of eating human flesh. I didn't cover that in this video, but I want you to do some research on that. This is why I bring these topics to you, so that you can further do some research if it so interests you. Oh, sorry, I thought the cap was on the camera. So, do some research on the psychological effects of eating human flesh after a certain amount of time. I think you're going to be surprised how much of a difference that makes on those who do consume human flesh. One of them is it becomes very addictive. Very addictive. And since a lot of your friends and family don't die a lot around you, eventually you're going to start doing heinous things in order to fill that addiction. Okay. So here is his roommates and co-columnist's reaction to what he wrote. When my co-columnist and I shared a room, remember they're roommates, I frequently woke up to him standing over my bed with hunger in his eyes, mouth twitching and salivating in anticipation of sinking his teeth into my flesh. How would you know that? At the time, I brushed it off as nothing. Just what North Carolinians do, I guess. That is weird. But now he has displayed his true colors, as his column makes it clear. His lust for human tacos, hamstring hamburgers, and person pepperoni is insatiable. It's amazing how lightly they're taking this subject, which is the reason why I'm reading this, because it's so commonplace, this consensual cannibalism. Okay. He continues with, Mr. Brody would have us believe that consensual cannibalism is moral. More moral, in fact, than eating meat from other creatures. It is fitting that someone who roasts himself every other week in these pages would be in favor of cooking other people. But unfortunately for him, there are many acts that consent cannot make moral. A person cutting off their flesh, cooking it, and eating it is no less than self-mutilation. Okay, that's not exactly what he's talking about, but you're not eating yourself. He's talking about eating others. Regardless of how much they might want it or agree to it, it is impossible to consent to being eaten alive for the same reason that one cannot usually consent to suicide or self-harm. Again, his roommate is not talking about eating human beings as they're alive. He's talking about when they pass away, or they give the consent to have other people eat them when they pass away. Barring a few exceptions that prove the rule, such as when a patient is terminally ill, consenting to suicide, self-harm, and self-mutilation indicates an inability to think clearly and make informed decisions. No one can agree to their own death, and no one can agree to their own consumption. I'm going to reread that. No one can agree to their own death, and no one can agree to their own consumption. No one can agree to their own death. Yes, they can. That's called a will. Okay, and that's, there's many things in your will that you can agree to. Whether you want to be buried or, you want to be what? You want to, it's your choice how you want your body to be handled at death. And no one can agree to their own consumption. He's not talking about eating yourself. Again, he's talking about eating others. Anyways, doing so would transgress the limits that we place on the power of consent, limits that preserve life whenever possible. I can go on with this. It's a long article, but what it falls down to is, do we have the right to consensual cannibalism? I've already discussed in the episode about the laws in the country, except for the state of Idaho. There's no laws against consensual cannibalism. Albeit it's gross to many. Personally, I think it's disgusting, but we're missing the target here. Do people have the right to consume their dead one's flesh? Yes. There's no law against it. Is it morally right? That's an argument amongst many people. But psychologically and medically, is it right? That's one thing nobody's talking about. We have to do research in that. What's the effects of cannibalism? We have many, many stories in history. Let's talk about the Donner family, okay? Those of you who don't understand or know about the Donner family coming over the pass and having to eat each other in order to survive, look up that story. They did so because they had no other choice. But you have to read in the story how those who did consume human flesh drove them insane, and it became very addictive to them, and then they just ended up starting murdering each other, which is illegal in this country, of course, and in the world. You can't murder somebody to eat them. Okay, that's illegal. But to consume your dead one's flesh is not illegal. Okay. In my head, though, I have buried some family members. In my head, I'm thinking, how do you go about that? So when someone in your family or friends die, and they take it to the funeral home, or they take it to, the coroner's office. Of course, autopsy has to be done and all this other stuff. What do you do? What do? You just go with your station wagon or your SUV and pick up the dead body and come home and butcher it? That is so macabre. I don't understand how that's not affecting you psychologically. That you're actually butchering a loved one and then consuming it. I don't understand the stability in that. So let me know what you guys think. I'm going to end the video here. I think we've raised some good topics. I think we've become aware of what this is all about, and I am very interested in hearing what you guys have to think. Make some, give me some opinions, give me some comments. Let me know if you find out further information. It's something that's very intriguing to me, not because I want to do it. God forbid, I would never do that. But it's the fact that this is becoming like a norm is amazing to me. So let me know what you think. So I appreciate you guys, staying with me and walking with me through all this, and love that you're taking these trips with me. So remember, stay weird, always be weird, and be proud to be weird. And we will talk on the next investigation. Bye, guys.